And welcome in, everyone, to a very special edition of the It's Official podcast. We memorialize Jeff Siegel, the founder of this podcast, my longtime co host of more than 400 podcasts, passed away this past Saturday, just a week or so shy of his 75th birthday. Jeff was a friend to everybody in the racing industry and certainly a helping hand to thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of handicappers over the years. He touched the lives of many, and we're going to reflect on his career and his life here during the course of this podcast, but also we're going to take a look at some of his on-track achievements, go back and watch some of his old vintage clips and his days as a media personality. We'll look at some of our funnier moments here on this podcast as well. We'll go down memory lane, but I know Jeff listening in right now because that's what he does. He's looking down from heaven and saying, but what about the racing, Jeremy? Let's get to the racing. So this podcast, we typically take on 5 hot topics in horse racing each and every week. And Jeff started something called the Goosebump Award. When Jeff gets excited about a race, he gets rocking and he gets rolling and he gets excited and chirping and whipping and driving. And that's how Jeff watches horse races. And he had the Goosebump Award. And I can tell you right now, I've got the goosebumps on my arms just talking about it. He wanted to create something that each week, let's talk about the horse who gets us most excited about what's going on in horse racing. So there'd be no better way to start this podcast before we get to all the pleasantries and all the love that we share for Jeff. Let's do it the way he would do it to start off this week's Jeff Siegel Goosebump Award. Now, there was amazing performance in New York. No question about it. Napoleon Solo winning the Champagne Stakes in New York. A 2-year-old ran through the win for trainer Chad Summers. No question about it. In many weeks, that could have been the Goosebump Award winner. But this is Jeff Siegel's week we're talking about. There's not going to be any New York horses. It's West Coast, baby. So we go to the West Coast for Jeff. 2 good options last week. The 2-year-old filly Explorer in the Oak Leaf Stake for Bob Baffert. Obviously could have been a very popular pick for Jeff as a Goosebump Award winner. But what about Intrepido, the horse who goes to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile as one of the West's best now after winning the American Pharoah Stakes? An outstanding performance by Intrepido. He beat 2 Bob Baffert horses in breaking his maiden. He beat 4 of them last week in the American Pharoah. Let's go back and take a look. The Goosebump Award winner, Intrepido.
Desert Gate comes to the 3/8 pole, leading by a half length over Christopherson in second. Intrepido, Plutarch along the inside, Civil Liberty, and Balboa's gotten closer now. 5 lengths covers the field as Christopherson puts his head in front with a 1/4 mile to go. Desert Gate comes right back for more. Desert Gate, Christopherson. Desert Gate has the lead at the top of the stretch. Is asked to finish the job by Juan Hernandez now and opens up 2 with 1 furlong to go. Here's Plutarch along the inside, trying to challenge him in second. Intrepido running a good race, 16th pole. It's Desert Gate. Plutarch on the inside, hugs the rail and just keeps coming at him. Plutarch on the outside. Intrepido erupts, and Intrepido and Hector Berrios took off the final 16th to win the American Pharoah presented by DK Horse over Plutarch and Desert Gate.
Jeff would often say, who did you beat and how did you do it? When you beat 4 Bob Bafferts, including the runner-up in the Del Mar Futurity, and you do it with trouble the whole way and that determined finish. Little journalism-like there by Intrepido. If you saw that determination that he wouldn't be denied and kept coming, Jeff would have loved that performance on Saturday. What a good effort there. And that is the Goosebump Award winner for this week, Intrepido for trainer Jeff Mullins. He now heads towards the Breeders' Cup Juvenile as one of the West's best. The Del Mar Futurity winner, Brandt for Bob Baffert, passed on the 2-turn test in the American Pharoah. Perhaps he goes straight to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile on the stretch out. Of course, Ted Noffey was fantastic at Keeneland on Saturday, as expected. He's probably the favorite for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And again, Napoleon Solo. So you've got a really good-looking group from New York to Kentucky to California, at least 3 quality top-end juveniles heading towards the Breeders' Cup coming up on Halloween, October 31st at Del Mar. Of course, Jeff was the morning line maker at Del Mar for last year's Breeders' Cup. One of the things that made Jeff so special, not only to me, but other people, was how much he treasured other people's opinion. He learned from his experience, but your experience as well. And he wanted to know about it. He not only talked to you, he listened to you. And Jeff, when he was later in life, as he took on so many different hats in the racing industry, had never been a morning line maker. Del Mar, Santa Anita came along after the retirement of John White, a longtime cohort of his in Southern California in the press box and at HRTV. When John retired and stepped aside, they needed a new morning line maker in Southern California, and naturally they went to Jeff, the dean of handicappers in Southern California. And Jeff said, I'll take the job, no question. I want to try it. He consulted with me, knowing I'd done a lot of morning lines internationally over the last several years, and got some tips on how to do it and how to be better at it. And he said when the Breeders' Cup possibility came along for Del Mar, it was a great attraction, but also a great responsibility. And he said, can I run the morning line by you before we release it for the Breeders' Cup? I want to look at these odds and get a second opinion on him. And I talked about how I knew from experience that guys like Frank Carulli, who had done the morning line at Pimlico for years, would have a committee of members who he would run the line for the Preakness by to make sure that he just wasn't missing anything. And I said, that's a smart move to gather yourself around other people. So Jeff ran some of those morning lines by, and I got to tell you, he made the morning line for the Breeders' Cup on, 150, 180 horses. And I think we kind of debated 3 or 4 of the submissions that he sent in. There weren't many, a couple that, we said, like, let's consider this, let's consider that. And maybe he made some adjustments, maybe he didn't, but he wanted other people's opinions on him. And that's what made him so special. Let's go to our second topic this week as we get more into the tribute of Jeff Siegel. Now, this topic is kind of a funny headline because if you've watched this show enough, you might even snicker a little bit. The headline is, Don't You Forget About Me. Of course, it was a play on words to the Simple Minds song, ironically enough, for the Breakfast Club movie, released in February of 1985. The release date of the song, almost 40 years to the day of Jeff and I's final podcast that we did on this show in this February. Jeff used to bring that headline up about once every 2 months, it seemed like. He did the format for the show. Here's the 5 topics, here are the headlines, and he'd send them to me, and I'd put it together and do the background research, and he and I would banter about the topics. That's how the sausage was made on this particular podcast. And he kept giving the same headline, Don't You Forget About Me. I'm like, Jeff, you love that song a little too much. I was like, people are going to notice that you keep using the same headline. It was like every time Nysos would go off the workout tab and come back, our headline was Don't You Forget About Me. And he just laughed and said, you know what? If somebody figures out we keep reusing that headline, that means they're a really good listener, that they've been around a long time following us. So when we talk about Jeff Siegel, I say, don't you forget about me. We are never going to forget about him and all the just wonderful times that we had together. For those of you who first got introduced to Jeff Siegel, if you were in Southern California, it could have been in the 1970s. It could have been in the 80s, the 90s. If you're a national racing fan, probably HRTV, which launched in the early 2000s, is where you got your first views of Jeff Siegel on the air, because it got him outside of California and into national spaces. HRTV on cable systems across many homes around the country. And so that run of HRTV, which would later become XBTV, and the racing rights and such would be sold to FanDuel and TVG at one point. But that's where Jeff and his crew of other hosts really got together and formed a great family of on-air talent. Jeff paired up with Lafitte Pinkai III back then. He teamed up with Aaron Veracruzzi, and we're going to go back through a little trip down memory lane of some of then all the way to now as we look back on the life and times of Jeff Siegel on air and how we saw him in not so recent years and some more in recent years. The first clip's really interesting. We'll start off with the 2008 Preakness Stakes at Pimlico on air. I remember talking to Jeff that week and being down there. He and Lafitte were doing all the post-race interviews on HRTV, and Paul Pompa, the owner of Big Brown, who had just won the Preakness Stakes and was en route to perhaps a Triple Crown, was a surprise guest of he and Lafitte. Let's go back and take a look and listen how much reverence that the owner of the horse who just won the Preakness had for Jeff Siegel. This is pretty incredible.
Inside, actually, I'm just being told one final interview. Is that right? Where is Paul Pompa here?
Come on in, Paul.
Ambushed by the gentleman who started the whole deal here with Big Brown. Can you move in?
Come in the middle here.
We'll make room for you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us, Paul. Good to meet you. Jeff Siegel.
Congratulations.
I want to congratulate you.
Here we go.
No, listen.
Go away, let him talk.
You were the first one out of everybody that believed in our horse. After the March 5th allowance race, you said he was the best 3-year-old in the country. and you never wavered. There's only 2 other people, and I'm not going to mention them right now, that jumped on your bandwagon. That's Watchmaker, and that's a guy from the Daily News named Jeff Siegel. But I want to congratulate you. You're doing your job good.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
But you stuck by us, and I thank you very much.
Greatness is not hard to find. And when it hits you right in the face, it's pretty obvious.
Well, no, I know you've owned some horses, and you've had, you're an owner. You know what it's about. But no, you impressed us right from the beginning. You saw something in our horse, and it's very hard. With the injuries, anything could happen. But he's very special to us.
He's a very, very exciting horse. We were talking about his ability to accelerate, his ability to give certain moves. He's so light on his feet for a big, strong, impressive athlete that I think that's what makes him so great.
Switches occur when a horse is stretched out from a sprint to a route. Many times a trainer will use a series of short races to sharpen up a horse for a distance event or perhaps for conditioning purposes to further a horse's fitness. Some even use sprint races for schooling purposes to help the horse gain experience prior to an attempt around 2 turns. When trying to determine whether or not a horse will improve while stretching out from a sprint to a route, you should first examine the horse's past performance chart to determine whether he has ever routed successfully in the past. If so, the sprint to route angle can be considered in a very positive light.
You're standing on your soapbox, I'm looking you in the eye. Is there anyone on Saturday that can look American Pharoah in the eye?
I don't think so. And I think we're going to see a repeat of the Rebel in which American Pharoah was able to establish the pace, and he didn't even break that well in that race. Made the lead, ears went up, 3/4 in 1:15, just galloping along, chirp 2 at the top of the stretch. And as you can see in this video, he was very strong in the final furlong. It was an off track, but he obviously doesn't need any kind of off track to propel him. And as impressive as he was winning the Rebel in the prep for this race, he may very well run even better. He's worked spectacular since that last race right here at Santa Anita, 3/4 and 11 and change just the other day, and he was just unbelievably sharp. And he arrives in Arkansas running against essentially the same group of horses with the same exact pace scenario, similar to Dortmund. Dortmund won the Santa Anita Derby with the same exact kind of front-running trip against the same horses he had just beaten previous to that in the San Felipe, and I think we're going to see the same thing here, a repeat effort of the Rebel, only maybe even more impressive.
Well, if the handicapping aspect of the race is a foregone conclusion, what are we looking for from the Pharoah?
Well, I'd like to see him look somebody in the eye early on, or maybe even sit second, and prove that he can do that, because you're not guaranteed to make an easy lead in the Kentucky Derby. We know that. He's not a runoff. He doesn't run off and kind of hang on. He's a very easy horse to ride. But again, will he be as effective sitting behind another horse if, in fact, that's what it calls for? I don't know if that's going to happen in the Arkansas Derby. But if it did, I think it would teach us and let us believe that that's something that he could do if, in fact, it's required in Kentucky.
Our Triple Crown tracker takes us to Santa Anita on Saturday for the 7th race. It's the Grade 2 San Vicente Stakes, 7 furlong distance, and this is a very, very, very good colt. I love the outside draw for the second time starting son of Street Sense. He can stalk, pounce, and go whenever Joel Rosario wants him to go. He's got very, very good speed. He's worked well since his last race, and this gives him an opportunity to try to switch off, relax, and make a run. A little keen in his debut, wanted to go a little too fast the first part, but it sure didn't matter. Now, turning into the stretch, you can see him in the pink silks on the lead. Here's Concerteur just breezing. Mr. Impossible, again, who was entered and scratched out of this race, he's going to take a run at him, but Concerteur is going to leave him behind. Very impressive victory. The margin of victory, 3.5. You can see it could have been greater as Rosario kind of takes a hold in the final 16th of a mile, lets him coast home. Love the way Concerteur galloped out. Full of run, big, strong, strapping son of Street Sense. Absolutely should run farther. And this is a logical stepping stone for Concerteur. After breaking his maiden, he runs in this 7 furlong race, and after he gets done with this field, then he can stretch out. We'll see how far he can run.
Todd Pletcher, and by the way, credit to Pletcher for hiding this one. This one he was not even favored in this race. She wins by 14. She runs the last 8th and 11 and 1. 5/8 and 56 and 3. Margin of victory, 14.5 lengths. And she earns a 101, a triple-digit buyer number.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to see a 2-year-old earn a triple-digit buyer number anywhere this year. She does it in 56 and 3. It wasn't like she opened up and staggered home. Her best eighth was her last. If this race had been 6 furlongs, she probably would have won by 25. That had brought back memories of Landalucy about 40 years ago when she was at Hollywood Park doing the same thing for Wayne Lucas, the first horse that really, Wayne put Wayne on the map in thoroughbreds. And man, that reminded me of Landalucy. Now, I don't know whether she's going to go out and win grade ones, but I wouldn't put it past her based on what I saw.
Well, I don't know. This might be one of the better maiden 3-year-old fillies in the country right now, even though, again, she's a maiden. But I like her to win the stakes. I'm talking about number 10, Nitrogen. Her numbers, again, continue to rise. Now she's had some time off. As a bullet worked recently that showed me that she's fit and ready to resume her career for Mark Cassidy. I think she's got a chance to really develop, especially being by Medaglia d'Oro. And I think she'll pick up where she left off. And if she runs back to her Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies race, she'll outclass this field, I would think. And at 5-2 on the morning line, if you can get it, I think there's a gamble there. I'm agreeing with you. Maybe I'm a California honk. I know you're not. So
no, and I'm taking Baffert, and you're cold on a horse, which we've completely. It's like we're like Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd. We're trading places this week, I guess.
Exactly.
I'm taking Matticat Road, and you're going with Cassie. So
I can tell you this: if Matticat Road wins, it'll make me like the California horses even more than I do.
Yeah.
So, because I know he's not quite in the same league as the horses that we like there.
Fun to go down memory lane there with Jeff. It was kind of funny. The last pick he made on the podcast live with this was in the Sandman in the Rebel Stakes when I went with Bob Baffert. His first pick on a podcast back in 2019 with this, a Bob Baffert trainee Bast in the Chandelier Stakes. She went on to the winner's circle. So Jeff started a winner, closed out trading places together where I was on Baffert and he was against in the Rebel Stakes earlier this year in February. We've got a lot more to talk about here over the next several minutes or so, but reactions from around the world of horse racing. Steve Bick did a wonderful tribute over the past day or two on his At the Races show, stevebick.com. You can check out the replay of those. I had a good fortune of being a part of that conversation today on Tuesday. It was a pleasure to do so with so many other of Jeff's great friends. Just a little sampling around the way of the reaction to the passing of Jeff Siegel on the internet. Some of these quotes I took off various X feeds. Appreciate the folks who passed along their great messages. This photo from Jay Privman, the 1989 press corps at Santa Anita in the press box. You see Jeff bottom right there. He was the head. He was the head honcho down in the front row of the Santa Anita press box. The dean of the handicappers there. A little bit more hair back then along the sides, trimmed along the sides. It was his partner Zoe Cadman who got him to shave those and go with the Kojak look, she called it, and which Jeff had over the past several years. He and I, neither one of us really used a brush when it came to doing the podcast, which we share that in common for sure. Take the over on how much he'll be missed, said Steve Bick, host of the At the Races program. Liz Mullen, a journalist, said Jeff Siegel may have been the best horse racing handicapper in the United States, and he was humble about it too. I think that's one of the most telling things about him. I was happy to hail him as the world's greatest handicapper, said Andy Beyer, a legendary handicapper in his own right. In his legendary book, Picking Winners, again, he cited Jeff Siegel as the world's greatest handicapper. Can't argue with that. It was rare to watch, learn, and get the chance to work with the very best of their craft, said John Lindo, radio host in Southern California. It's impossible to fully sum up what he did for my career, said Andrew Champagne. And you talk about some of the younger people in the racing industry, people in their 20s, 30s, early 40s that were influenced by Jeff Siegel now and will be the future of the racing game. I'm 54. I'm about 20 years younger than Jeff. And he had a great impact on me over the last several years. And I've grown from learning from him as well. And his partner for many of those years on HRTV, Lafitte Pinkai III, amongst all the beautiful things that he has said about Jeff, he joked tongue-in-cheek that, man, he would have loved that UCLA win. There's no question about that. UCLA, of course, knocking off a highly ranked Penn State team on Saturday at the Rose Bowl, a place where Jeff spent many a Saturday afternoon. I got to tell you, if you twisted his arm and said, would you rather be at the Rose Bowl or Pauley Pavilion or Santa Anita, it might have depended on the opponent and the card. He loved all three of those places with tremendous reverence. he graduated or went to school at San Jose State. There's some question whether he graduated or not. He told me that he majored in Golden Gate Fields and Bay Meadows when he went to San Jose State, spent most of his time there. But Jeff was a big supporter and booster of the UCLA program, worked in the sports information department in later years, grabbing video of post-game press conferences and such, shooting video, and traveling along with the team to many great locales, to Hawaii for some of the basketball tournaments, Las Vegas for the conference basketball tournaments. We were looking potentially getting together at Penn State a year ago, but UCLA wasn't playing well enough that he didn't want to make the trip all the way to Happy Valley, PA, my home state. So, Jeff, a big supporter of UCLA sports, of course, and Lafitte said, and I agree with that. In fact, the last text I sent to Jeff, I had not known that he had passed at the time. I knew that he was in hospice and the end was close. I texted him a picture, a screenshot of Jerry Neuheisel, the assistant coach for UCLA, being carried off the field, and screenshotted it off my television and just sent it to him with the word joy. It was the last text message I sent to Jeff on Saturday, and I'm wearing the UCLA powder blue here for him in his honor on this one. You mentioned Lafitte Pinkai III. He was his host and co-host, of course, now with the Fox programming and with HRTV. Lafitte and Jeff made an incredible team together. And I can tell you this personally. I've worked with Lafitte. I've worked with Jeff a lot. He revered Lafitte Pinkai III. He talked so glowingly about him in our conversations that Jeff and I would have. We have our on-air podcast, but we'd probably talk 45 minutes to an hour before we'd start rolling the tape. After we got done taping the 45-minute podcast, we talk about another 45 minutes or an hour a couple times every week, as we did a Tuesday and Friday show, and we talked during the week in the preparation some. But every time he brought up Lafitte, it was with pride. I mean, he really, really loved that guy and just respected him to the hilt, and was so proud of what Lafitte has done in racing and beyond as a broadcaster. So I just know that there was a wonderful connection there. Spoke highly of Aaron Veracruzzi, his former host with HRTV as well, and everybody that he worked with. Jeff didn't have a bad word for anybody. Maybe a jock after a little curious ride. There might have been a little comment here and there, as we all do as horse players, but certainly nothing with any stick and angst to it. But Jeff had nothing but good things to say just about everybody. And let's continue with another quick round of these tributes that were passed along the internet. Caton Bradar, who worked with him with HRTV and a good friend of both of ours, hands down the sharpest handicapper I had the privilege of working next to. It's a very sad day. To have worked with him, learned from him, we are the lucky ones. I think that's well said by Caton. Jay Hovde, who was also on the Steve Bick Show today, he said from day one, Jeff was a kindred spirit on our journey through racing's greatest decades. You think of Hovde and everything that he covered as a journalist through the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and all the great racing through Southern California back in those days. The Affirms, the John Henrys, the Spectacular Bids coming west, all the wonderful racehorses from the Ali Shebas to Sunday Silence and company. Racing fan and handicapper who was a serious tournament player, Mike Wilkening. I thought this was a really telling tweet from him where he said, Jeff Siegel merits a place in the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame as a pillar of the turf. There is a media wing to the Hall of Fame, and I hope that Jeff Siegel will be a part of that and under consideration very, very soon. I second that, Mike Wilkening. And finally, from Zoe Cadman. Fly high, Jeff. You will be missed, my friend. I think it's a great point to end up with. And Zoe with the uplifting comment there. You see the crew from the press box there. Had a pleasure working with Terry Terrell over the years and many of the others in those shots. The Santa Anita press box, not as busy as it once was. Press boxes around the country simply aren't. There was a time when, even in my early days in Oklahoma City, when Remington Park was kind of in its infant days, and I was part of the press box crew there were two different writers from Dallas who would come up and cover the races 2.5 hours away. You had your Tulsa, 2 newspaper reporters. You had Jerry Schottenkirk in Oklahoma City. You had a full press box there, along with handicappers and TV personalities and such. It's not the same anymore. Digital has changed things up with that, no question about it. And the lack of sports media, much less racing media, have changed the way those press boxes look. So it's kind of fun to get that look back. Steve Bick shared that photo from Jay Privman on his X feed. So I thought that was really cool to share with the group. So don't you forget about me. We absolutely will not. Part of the lyrics to that song, Will you recognize me, call my name, or walk on by? You will be recognized, Jeff Siegel, and hopefully you'll be recognized by the racing community in Southern California. There was a beautiful moment of silence for him on Sunday at Santa Anita during the live races. They name stakes races for people in horse racing a lot of times posthumously. A stakes race in Jeff's honor would be great, but as a wagerer and as a bettor and as an educator and an entertainer of the racing pursuit of handicapping, I'd like to see a wager name for Jeff Siegel. How about the Pick Six in Southern California being renamed the Siegel Six? Who's behind me on that? I think as a Pick Six player, an aficionado of the Pick Six, a guy who was against the jackpot wagers and for the traditional Pick Six, I think the Siegel Six has a good ring to it. That's going to be my suggestion moving forward. If you're going to honor Jeff Siegel, do it at the windows. That's the way he would like to have done it. Let's go to our next topic this week on the program as we hit topic number 3. Simple Minds and Don't You Forget About Me. That was a great hit and one of Jeff's favorite songs and one of our most used headlines. But what about his greatest hits on the track? I mean, we know him as a media personality. And like I said, a lot of folks in a national standpoint didn't know Jeff in the 70s, 80s, and 90s if you weren't in Southern California. But from HRTV forward, he was a TV personality. But prior to that, and even later in his years, in fact, he had a starter on the track named Surfing USA at Santa Anita with Eric Sondheimer, his partner in the horse, just last week at Santa Anita. He owned horses all the way through his life as an adult, and he started a Clover Racing partnership back in the day with Barry Irwin. It would eventually become Team Valor. They had a lot of success, and you go back to the 1989 Santa Anita Handicap, the big cap. They won it with a 50-1 shot named Martial Law. Jeff talks about this as his greatest moment in racing. $103 winner. They paid $40,000 to supplement. Trainer Julio Canani wasn't too wild about running the long shot in the race, but between Irwin and Siegel, they convinced him to take the shot. Martial Law won. It was a raucous scene in the press box from everybody who was there, who saw it and lived it. And Martial Law was the most notable winner locally at Santa Anita for Jeff Siegel as an owner. But he also had a big winner with Clover Racing Stables in the Breeders' Cup. It just goes to show when you're a Californian how big the big cap is. Because if you ask Jeff what's the biggest race you ever won, he's going to say the Santa Anita Handicap with Martial Law. That doesn't count the Breeders' Cup turf. They were partners in prize with Meadowview Stable, Meadowbrook Farm, I should say. Meadowbrook Farm and Clover Racing Stables were partners on Prize in 1989. Now, Prize was a 3-year-old in 1989 who upset the great Sunday Silence of all horses on the dirt when they ran in the Swap Stakes at Hollywood Park. Neil Drysdale trained Prize. They had never run on the turf before. Well, if you're willing to win the big cap with a 50-1 shot and $40,000 supplement, why not roll one into the Breeders' Cup turf first time on the grass? Let's go back in time. This is Siegel's greatest hit, in my estimation, from a national standpoint. Prized in the 1989 Breeders' Cup turf.
14 in line for the Breeders' Cup turf, and they're off. And Caltech breaks alertly. Prized is out there and toward the inside. Il de Chypre eager to run on the lead, and Green Barb is coming after him early. So they settle down the backstretch. Il de Chypre now. Tony Clark trying to throttle his early speed. Caltech sitting just off him on the outside. Green Barb now is settled in third position. There's a gap of 4, and Prized is now fourth on the outside. Scenic is saving ground early. Lady in Silver is tucked in behind them. Starlift 3 wide round the turn. Last year's turf champion Sunshine Forever now is about 8 lengths off the lead, now racing in 8th position. Then it's Sierra Roberto followed by Bahira. Pleasant Variety is saving ground all the way. El Senor is racing about 12 lengths off the early lead. He has 2 horses beaten, and they are long shots, Melicius and Hodges Bay, who's down inside. Passing us for the first time, it's still a headstrong Il de Chypre, and on the outside, Caltech, who's under a firm hold. They're moving easily. The pace is slow, 48 3/5 seconds. Now they have one more turn around the course here at Gulfstream Park. Il de Chypre still bounding along on an easy lead. Caltech's been prompting him throughout with only mild pressure. Prize is poised just off them on the outside. Green Barb has been saving ground throughout. On the outside, Starlift with clear running in 5th position now. Scenic is within striking distance. He's 5 lengths off the lead, but he's in behind horses. Lady in Silver still saving ground toward the rail. Bahiro clear of trouble on the outside now. And Sunshine Forever as Asper Run. Then it's Sierra Roberta, El Senor. Herb McCauley still patient with him. He's about 11 lengths off the lead. Hilda Chypre still leads. 3/4 in 13 and 2. A half mile to run on the turf. Hilda Chypre is still there. Caltech is now roused, and Renee Douglas asking him for run now. Green Barb is 3rd. Prized is full out. He's dropping back and forth. Scenic is nowhere to go in between horses. Sierra Roberto and Starlift is kicking in on the outside. Lady in Silver toward the rail. Melisius is picking up momentum. El Senor is still 9 lengths off the lead, and he's beginning to move from the back of the pack. And Caltech forges to the front as they turn for home. Hilda Chypre is put to a full-out drive to try to stay with them. Prized on the outside is now 3rd. Sierra Roberta is coming with her run now, and here she comes. Caltech desperately holding on. Prized is surging. Sierra Roberta toward the inside. Bahira late run. A driving finish in the turf. And here's the wire, and it is Prized. A desperate nose. Very close. Sierra Roberta was right there. Oh, it is very close, but it looked like Prized from my angle here. And what an absolutely remarkable victory. His first race ever on the grass, and he wins the $2 million turf.
You can't win it if you're not in it. Jeff Siegel, Prized, Barry Irwin with Clover Stable, and of course the partnership there with the breeder Meadowbrook Farm. Neil Drysdale, Prized, 1989 Breeders' Cup Turf winner at Gulfstream Park. Looked like he was beaten 4 or 5 times in the race, and Tom Durkin basically called him out on the far turn, saying that Prized wasn't doing anything and he was kind of, out of it. And just like Jeff Siegel, just kind of kept going and going and going and going. One of the most remarkable Breeders' Cup wins of all time. First time ever on the turf, and it was Prized, the 3-year-old, beating the older horses. What a year. You beat Sunday Silence in the swaps. You win the Breeders' Cup turf in your first career grass race. Let's go to our 4th topic on It's Official this week, and we're going to talk about working with the legend. A few minutes here for me to recollect about our time here on the podcast. We got into some of this already, but working with Jeff Siegel, absolute pleasure. We did 2 shows together. It's Official, this podcast, and one called First Call, which is a Friday handicapping show. First Call actually started in 2019. We started this show, It's Official, 3 years ago because Jeff wanted to do more, and that was what he was always wanting to do. As he got up in age and he realized that younger people were getting the TV jobs and he wasn't necessarily the first choice for a lot of gigs anymore, he wanted to keep working. He wanted to stay relevant, and he found the online space and partnered with me in a way to just stay at it, to stay fresh, stay young, give yourself purpose to handicap and to work hard at things. And he did. I mean, he was tireless in his research. You guys saw it on these podcasts and in our handicapping shows. I mean, how many international races did we pull out where the race calls were in a language we didn't even understand? Jeff was scouring the world for video and for important races that we needed to see, and he picked those out and we shared them on this podcast. We did more than 400 shows together, 170 plus of these It's Official podcast, 260 plus of the First Call podcast. Of course, First Call was a spinoff of the TV show he did on HRTV, which was called First Call, the morning show there that he was such a big part of. And then he brought that to the podcast world, and he and I worked together. I called it First Call with Jeff Siegel when we started the podcast, and about 2 shows into it, he said, "Why is your name not on the show?" And I said, "Because this is your show, Jeff." He's like, no, we're partners in this show. We do the show together. See if you get the graphics guys to change things up. And we sent back a request for graphics, and it became First Call with Jeff Siegel and Jeremy Plonk. It's Official together. That's how he was. He wanted people to have an equal say in things. He had his opinions, obviously, but he wanted to know yours. There were so many times, and you guys heard this on the podcast, is we'd be handicapping a race or talking about a race where he'd defer and say, "You're the guy who knows Keeneland better than I do. You tell me." And then when you hear that from someone the likes of Jeff Siegel, it really makes you feel good. And one time he told me, we were early in the go of the shows that we were doing. I was like, "Jeff, should we get together and kind of rehearse this a little bit, kind of at least go through a rundown?" He's like, "We don't need to." He said, "I can take you anywhere, and I know you know the material." and you could take me anywhere, and I know the material. So here are the topics, here are the headlines. Let's just go. And literally our rundown was like 5 sentences on a piece of paper. Race headline and which piece of video we wanted. And that was it. We didn't prepare. And when we talked for like 45 minutes before every podcast, it was about family, what we were doing, sports. It was a lot of sports. I mean, we talk sports all the time. We talked about my dog Graham. He loved my dog Graham, and Graham, you've heard him on the podcast a million times, whether he's shaking and his tags are jingling or he's barking, and I would be embarrassed. I'd be like, "Oh, come on, Graham, you're ruining the podcast." And Jeff's like, "No. He's part of the show." And you would always hear him. He'd be like, he would talk to the dog on the podcast, and he loved to see the dog before and after the shows, and I bring him up on camera for him. And and when Jeff was ill here in the last several months, I would send him pictures of my dog Graham, and hopefully to help uplift him a bit. He called me in late August. We hadn't been in touch by phone in several months. We texted several times a week during his illness, but he wasn't filling up the phone calls and video, obviously. So we stopped doing the podcast, but we kept in contact every few days, every week by text to see how each other were doing. And I got a surprise phone call in late August, and I was like shocked. And I picked it up, frantically. And it was just so wonderful to talk to him for about 15 minutes and just kind of hear his voice. And he kept a positive, uplifting outlook. He said there's light at the end of the tunnel, light at the end of the tunnel. That was his expression that he would always say. He was happy that the facility he was in while he was recovering after his treatments and everything that he had to go through, the transfusions and all that his sister brought her dog in, and he said, I just couldn't believe how great that was to spend some time with the dog. And it just made me feel good because I knew that, that I'd been sending him some pictures and things like that, it was something that helps, and obviously pets and dogs are therapeutic to a lot of us. And the fact that he always loved Graham and wanted him to be part of the podcast. He was like the third unofficial member of the show with me and Jeff, and Graham's a sad today too, because, Jeff's not with us anymore, but I promised myself I wouldn't get choked up here. So we're going to try to, pray for strength and get through this. We did our final show together on February 21st of 2025, a first call. And again, we previewed the Rebel Stakes and some other stakes races that day. Jeff came back for the Kentucky Derby and for the Belmont Stakes. He did 2 handicapping videos while he wasn't feeling well. But he felt well enough to do those, and it was out of the blue. We're putting together the wager guides for First Bet and Express Bet, which I've done for the last 20 years, and Jeff has always been a part of those. And I wasn't counting on him for the Kentucky Derby, and then out of the blue, a couple days before, I just get a notice from him saying I'm in with and that's how he always replied. Like whenever it was, hey, we've got a request, it was I'm in capital letters. 2 words, exclamation point. He never turned down an opportunity to contribute. And I just got that I'm in message a couple days before the Derby. And next thing you know, a video shows up that he shot from his home studio. And he handicapped the Kentucky Derby for us for the wager guide. And then he came back and did one more for us in the Belmont Stakes. And so in true Jeff Siegel fashion, he picked Bob Baffert and Rodriguez in the Belmont because he loved to pick the Baffert horses, and he loved the Curlins, right? I mean, if there's anything you got out of these podcasts and handicapping over the years, is how much Jeff loved the sire Curlin, and we used to joke about it quite a bit. But so Jeff was able to come back and have a couple last hurrahs with us on video that way, recorded videos, and I'm just grateful for all the contributions he made. He handicapped through the Santa Anita spring and summer meet before stepping aside. He was the morning line maker at Del Mar and Santa Anita for a time there at the end of his career. So you never get too experienced or too old to take on new challenges. I think it's a good lesson. He had never been a morning line maker till he was 73 years old, something like that, and took on a new challenge. And not only took it on, but took it on at the Breeders' Cup level. Really something to be learned there. He was always strategizing about what's next. I mean, he would always come to me and, what are we going to do next? What's next? What's next? We started with that first show. Like I said, we started with the other show in the First Call podcast in 2019. And then he wanted to do more. We got to do more. We got to do more, and sometimes you you meet some resistance at higher levels, and people that are like from a content standpoint of like, okay, well, we don't need to do this. We don't need to do that. But what we want to do is this. And you'd be pitching and pitching and pitching until we kind of got, some of the ideas that we wanted together out in the world and in the handicapping world. And I was really proud the way he pushed me to be better at stuff. And when you work alongside somebody who's that good at what they do, you're missing the boat if you don't try to equal their effort, because you will find out that you get so much better when you're around people that are that talented and match up that kind of effort with the talent. It was just really an absolute pleasure to work with him. Again, 400 plus shows, and we're going to wrap this up here shortly with our final segment that we did each and every time here on the podcast with Jeff. It was always about the stars of tomorrow. Then you're always looking forward. And as they say in horse racing, no trainer ever passed away, committed suicide in the fall with a good 2-year-old, because when they turn 3, hope springs eternal. We always wanted to finish the show on a positive note, because that's how Jeff was. Light at the end of the tunnel, as he kept texting me throughout his illness. Our star of tomorrow is a horse named Heartily. Significantly enough, we're going to finish up the podcast with this winner from Keeneland last week. If you saw opening weekend at Keeneland, there was only one wire-to-wire winner the first 2 days of racing. It came in Saturday's finale. It was a Wesley Ward trainee and left no doubt about it.
And now Helmet of Will switches off the rail, comes up to the outside to challenge. Steel Golden is running late. Boonesboro, Circle Me. Steel Golden coming down the center of the track. 7 lengths behind the lead, though, of Heartily. And Heartily in front by a 6-length margin at the 16th pole. It is Heartily for John Velasquez, his 5th win on this card. Late run from Liberty Valance to challenge at the wire for second, but no catching. Heartily in the nightcap.
Heartily, our star of tomorrow for trainer Wesley Ward, $375,000 2-year-old by Complexity. Look forward to this one moving forward, and looking forward to the future, as Jeff always did with our stars of tomorrow, the aptly named Heartily. Let's review the 5 topics on It's Official this week. Our tribute to Jeff Siegel. This week's Goosebump Award, we had to go to California. And when you beat 4 Bob Bafferts, you get the honor. Intrepido, winner of the American Pharoah Stakes. Don't You Forget About Me, the Simple Minds song that was a headline so many times on this podcast. We're not going to forget you, Jeff Siegel. We had a beautiful video tribute looking back at some of your on-air discussions over the years, from HRTV to First TV to XBTV to here on our podcast. And we got to hear from folks around the country with their reactions on Twitter/X and all the great outpouring tributes that came in for Jeff. His greatest hits on the track, winning the 1989 Santa Anita Handicap with the $40,000 supplement Martial Law. 50-1 shot for Julio Canani. And then we talked about Prized, winning the 1989 Breeders' Cup Turf in his first career turf start for trainer Neil Drysdale. In recent years, too, he owned horses in Golden Gate, in Northern California, in Arizona. He had horses with Jed Josephson in Northern California. Leonard Powell and John Sadler trained some of his horses here in Southern California in recent years, and even trips to Arizona on some off days to take a look at some horses. He had a Turf Paradise in recent years. He was a busy man traveling around following up on his horses. And a star of tomorrow, the aptly named Heartily, first-time starter, the first wire-to-wire winner of the meet at Keeneland. Wesley Ward trained that one to win by 6.5 lengths. That's our star of tomorrow. His name was Heartily. And those 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel said so. That's the way we do it here on this game. That was a slogan that Jeff came up with at the very beginning of this show. He said, I said, why are we calling this It's Official? He said, because I said so. And that's how it is. So we ran down the 5 topics, and they're now official because we said so. And Jeff gets the last word here. On behalf of everybody with First Bet, Express Bet, the Stronach Group, anybody who's worked with Jeff over the years, from Santa Anita Park to Hollywood Park to XBTV and back to the HRTV days, and racing fans around the world, I want to say what a pleasure it was to do this. I'm not quite sure how I made it through. I thank the good Lord for the strength and the power to do so, and the opportunity I had to be close to Jeff over these last several years. A true great friend to everyone. We are going to miss him greatly, but we are going to honor his spirit in the future. We'll have more news about this podcast and other podcasts that we do here on the network with First Bet and Express Bet and Horseplayer now in the coming weeks. But for now, we sign off for the final time. How ironic. We're at the 44-minute mark. Every time Jeff and I did a podcast together, it finished between 44 and 45 minutes, and we didn't have a format. So at this point, I say thank you so much. We love you, Jeff Siegel. Take care, everybody.